First of all, I hope all of you are doing well, keeping yourself safe and also sane at the same time. I apologize for starting this live lecture slightly late. Yeah, I had some issues with the restream, so I hope those issues have been resolved and that this live lecture is being streamed on the various platforms, YouTube, Facebook, and also Twitter. Um, Last week we looked at the Quran, Hadith, and natural sciences. Yeah. So today, inshallah, we will look at the Quran, Hadith, and also human sciences. Uh, I would perhaps say that the live lecture will be very theoretical in nature. Yeah. Especially when we're dealing with references from Lao Saifi. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. Yeah. Uh, but it's indeed quite theoretical in nature, and perhaps we shall discuss this further in our virtual meeting on Wednesday morning, inshallah. So without any delay, perhaps in the next 30 minutes or so, I shall go through the slides. Let me share the slides with you now. Let me larger. So yes, the Quran, Hadith, and human science. So let's begin with an observation made by Taha Jabir al-Alwani, yeah, in his book, The Islamization of Methodology of the Behavioral Sciences. So when we mention the behavioral sciences, basically we can also refer to as the human sciences, yeah, because human sciences is known with different names, yeah. Some call it humanities, some call it social sciences, some call it behavioral sciences, etc. Yeah. So basically, this is the problem, yeah, which he observed in relation to the behavioral sciences. Yeah. So he argues that the social sciences and humanities, for example, psychology, sociology, education, economics, politics, and media, from the intellect of modern people, whatever their religion, in accordance with their orientation and educational influence. So basically, uh, uh, he argues that the social sciences and humanities form the intellect of modern people in accordance with their orientation and also educational influence. So all these subject areas, yeah, in relation to social sciences and humanities, as he mentioned, yeah, psychology, etc., are the product of the Western mind, which formed them in accordance with its own philosophy and complicated outlook on the universe, life, and humanity, and then molded them to suit their own needs and without any regard for the needs of other peoples. So here he is trying to argue again that social science, yeah, as a discipline, an academic discipline, as it exists today, yeah, is largely informed by the Western worldview, yeah, the Western mind, uh, if we can call it as such, yeah, to suit their own needs, basically to suit the needs of the Western people, yeah, without any regard for the needs of other peoples. So this is the criticism put forward by Taha Jabir Al-Awani when it comes to the human sciences, yeah. So the methodologies of these sciences, as well as their subject matter, results, aims, behavior, and outlook on life and the universe are all in sharp conflict with our beliefs, concepts, and aims in life. So he is arguing that the methodologies of the social sciences as we have it today, yeah, which was developed mainly in the West, yeah, basically it's in conflict with uh, the beliefs, concepts, and aims of Muslims, yeah, in their lives. So this is the observation made by Taha Jabir Al-Alwani. He further argues uh, about the shortcomings of the West when it comes to the social sciences or the behavioral sciences, yeah, in which firstly they limit the sources of knowledge because they confine the sources of knowledge to the human intellect alone, yeah, and as such it deprives itself of the most important source of knowledge, namely divine revelation, which provides comprehensive and detailed knowledge. Yeah. So here Taha Jabir Alwani argues that the main shortcoming of the Western methodology in dealing with social sciences is disregarding revelation as a source of knowledge. Yeah, they only depend on their human intellect. Secondly, limitation of the means of examining the knowledge produced by the human intellect. Yeah. So they limited the means of examining the knowledge produced by the human intellect to experiments alone and made this the only proof of soundness in any branch of knowledge. So they heavily depended on experiments to validate, yeah, the knowledge which they produced. Yeah. So they thought that experiments are the only means of verification and therefore are suitable for every field of knowledge. And thirdly, application of deduction regardless of wide differences. Yeah. So the West subjected the behavioral and social sciences to the rules and methodologies of the natural and applied sciences, when in fact these two sciences, these two branches of knowledge, yeah, the natural sciences and the social sciences are different in nature. Yeah. So as such, applying that which or imposing the methods which they use on the natural sciences on social sciences is a flaw, yeah, which Taha Jabir al-Anwani uh, uh, suggests, yeah, or propose. So the Western exclusion. So now we are coming back to the limitation of the sources of knowledge when it comes to the social and behavioral sciences. Yeah, we mentioned the observation by Taha Jabir Al-Alwani regarding the exclusion of revelation, and here Safi is also stressing upon this point. Yeah, he said the Western exclusion of revelation from the realm of science is not based on the denial of the fact that divine revelation makes assertions about the nature of reality, for it obviously does. Yeah. So here he is arguing that, despite the exclusion of revelation uh, from being a source when it comes to the science, yeah, to social science, to humanities, yeah, uh, this does not actually deny the fact, right? This cannot deny the fact that that revelation uh, indeed, yeah, uh, what do you call it, make certain assertions about the nature of reality. Yeah. So the exclusion is based rather on the claim that only empirical reality can be ascertained. Yeah. Uh, so again, when we talk about empirical reality, this is also very connected to experiments that which can be observed and tangible, etc. Yeah. And non-empirical or metaphysical reality is not susceptible to verification through experiments, and as such it cannot be included in the realm of science. Yeah. So the main reason perhaps why revelation has been excluded, yeah, as a source of knowledge when it comes to the sciences, yeah, is because the non-empirical or the metaphysical reality is not susceptible to verification through experiments, because they perhaps are not tangible, yeah, cannot be measured, yeah. So as such, they are being excluded from being sources, yeah, of knowledge when it comes to such sciences. The revelation, at least in its final and Islamic form, seeks its justification in empirical reality. Yeah. So empirical reality is the manifestation of a transcendental reality. And the Quran, in fact, abounds in verses of science that emphasizes the interconnectedness of the empirical and the transcendental. Yeah. And as such, revelation has to be approached not as an immediately accessible set of statements, but as a given phenomenon, yeah, consisting of signs of which understanding requires constant and recurring interpretation and systematization. Yeah. So he now Safi is trying to stress that when we approach revelation, yeah, we should not approach it immediately as an accessible set of statements, yeah, but given as a given phenomenon consisting of signs of which understanding requires constant recurring interpretation and systematization. So even when we approach revelation, we need to interpret and also systematize, yeah, the phenomenon or the phenomena which is mentioned in revelation. And divine revelation is not confined to providing the basic conceptual and motivational foundation of the social sciences, but extends to the formation of the central theoretical elements of these sciences. So he further argues that we should not confine divine revelation, uh, which just provides conceptual and motivational foundations of the social sciences, but this should be extended, meaning the role of revelation here should be extended, to the formation of central theoretical elements of these sciences as well. Modern empiricism continue to embrace principles and concepts generated within traditions rooted in divine revelation. Secularization in the West aimed in the first instance at undermining the, how do you pronounce this word? Ecclesiastical authority, and not at the complete repudiation of religious beliefs and values. Because they had, in the West, they had issues with the clergy. They had issues with the way in which the church perhaps had certain stance or certain views on certain issues. So that was a problem that the West actually had, which Muslims did not have. So many religious ideas and values, such as freedom, equality, or the rationality of the universal order, became secular values and beliefs, when in fact we as Muslims also believe in such values. So such values which were initially rooted in religion, such as freedom, equality, rationality of the universe, or the universal order, suddenly became secular values and beliefs, when in fact they are rooted in religion. So the science revelation conflict is neither imperative nor universal, but specific to Western experience and Western religion. Again, as I pointed out just now, so Muslims did not have this problem. Uh, uh, the West had this problem because the church and the clergy wanted to have monopoly, perhaps over, over certain issues, and there seems to have been a conflict between reason and revelation in the West, but in the Muslim world, such did not exist. So Islamic scientific tradition has never experienced any crisis similar to what occurred in the Western tradition. As such, any attempts to reproduce this conflict in Muslim culture is hence artificial and inspired by an irrational desire to walk in the footsteps of another culture. And so imposing, that conflict between reason and revelation, which existed in the West, or was a response towards certain worldviews which were held by the religious authorities in the West during that time. This issue or this problem should not be imposed on us, because we did not have this problem in the first place. So early Muslim scholars actually developed elaborate schemes for analyzing the divine text, and their analysis of social and historical structures was never based on an articulate and well-developed methodology. So this was the main issue. There was never, as Safi argues, a well-articulate and well-developed methodology when it comes to the way in which analysis of social and historical structures were done by Muslim scholars. Because knowledge of society and history was based rather on common sense. On perhaps what was considered to be common sense, something which was common. During the time of Ibn Khaldun, Muslim scientific tradition witnessed a serious attempt to develop theories for explaining social interaction by identifying certain historical patterns. So by identifying historical patterns, then Muslim scientists such as Ibn Khaldun could develop theories for explaining social interaction. So although Ibn Khaldun was able to introduce highly mature theories of society and history, the methodology or the methodological foundation which he based his theorizing on was never discussed. So the issue here is the way in which those theories were developed, were perhaps not discussed in detail, and this was the problem which Safi identifies. So what's the consequences of such? Yeah. So the absence of mature methods which could facilitate a profound analysis of the purposes and rules determining the actions of early Muslims or the social and political struggles or structures governing their interactions. So there was an absence of mature methods. So this was the consequences, yeah, of the absence of a methodological foundation for theorizing. Yeah. So classical scholars unwittingly elevated to the status of universality the actions of a historically determined community and idealized the behavior of fallible human beings. So this was the consequences of such, according to Safi, in which classical scholars, yeah, elevated or considered universal the actions of a particular or community in history, yeah, and idolize that as a model, yeah, when in fact uh, uh, since that involved actions of human beings, and human beings are infallible, it it perhaps might be a shortcoming to do so. Yeah. So classical Muslim scholars could not make full use of the records of history, a source of knowledge alongside revelation. Why? Because they were primarily interested in identifying social and political models to be recreated and in specifying exemplary behaviors to be emulated. Yeah. So they were more interested in coming up with models, which should be emulated and followed, yeah, by the people. Yeah. And they were not really interested in discovering patterns of behavior or isolating general tendencies which could be used to explain political interactions and social relations, because their main pursuit was to come up with certain models, yeah, identify social and political models which can be recreated, yeah, and in specifying exemplary behaviors which should be emulated by people. As such, classical Muslim scholars had never developed a methodology for analyzing social phenomena. So, this is what Safi argues. Um, he says that we should treat the Quranic discourse as a comprehensive whole, yeah, and any attempt to determine the Quranic position regarding a human act, yeah, by contemplating isolated Quranic statements is bound to lead to inconsistencies or outright misconception, yeah. So here he argues that if we try to determine, oh, this is the Quranic position on this particular action based on certain isolated Quranic statements, this would actually lead to inconsistencies and outright misconception. Yeah, this indeed, yeah, is true in the sense that sometimes we try to infer from certain Quranic verses that it actually, or we try to impose, yeah, our understanding that verse actually means this, that, yeah, in relation to certain human action, when perhaps that is, imposing such is not suitable. Yeah. To derive rules and concepts from divine revelation, we need to employ a method sufficiently developed to allow the derivation and systemization of these rules and concepts. So here he is arguing for a sufficient method to be developed, yeah, which would allow us then to derive and systematize, yeah, these rules and concepts. Yeah. So what should be done in order for us, yeah, to come up or develop, yeah, such a method? Firstly, one should identify all statements, both Quranic and prophetic, relevant to the question at hand. So bring together all the evidences from the Quran, from the Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, yeah, on the particular issue at hand. Secondly, attempt to understand the meaning of relevant Quranic statements individually and in relation to one another. So first, we look at the Quranic verse, yeah, try to understand the meaning of that relevant Quranic verse individually, and try to connect it or relate it with other Quranic verses and also prophetic traditions. Thirdly, identify the efficient cause, the illah, yeah, the illah for which the command or the directive embodied in the text was made. So we try to determine the underlying cause of why such a statement or such a directive or command was made in the Qur'an or in the Hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then unite and organize the various rules and principles derived from the revealed text. Yeah. So the various rules need to be built into a comprehensive and internally consistent system. Yeah. So here it says that then we have to unite and organize the various rules and principles which were derived from the text. Yeah. And develop or build a comprehensive and internally consistent system in which there is no contradiction when we look at that system. As for historical inference, so that is basically how one should infer, yeah, principles, yeah, or rules from the text. But now let's look at historical inference. How then we should infer from history when it comes to, uh, uh, when we study history and the behavior of human beings in the past. Yeah, how then could we infer certain rules and principles from that? So, thorough study and analysis of human actions and interactions must be undertaken before a revealed rule can be implemented, and that an appropriate methodology for the study of action must be identified. Discovering the rules governing the underlying structures of social phenomena must begin by analyzing the basic elements which constitute this phenomena, namely human action. So now we are studying or inferring from human action. Yeah. So how is this to be done? Firstly, we have to analyze the actions of the individuals involved in the social phenomenon under consideration. So disclosing its three determinants: purpose, motive, and also rule. So what was the purpose of the action? Was the motive and the rule governing such actions? Secondly, classify the various modes or types of actions on the basis of the similarities and differences of the components. Division of the population into groups and also subgroups. Identify the universal rules which govern the interaction between the various groups which were identified in step B. Yeah. And then to systematize, yeah, the universal rules arrived at in the previous steps, and at this step eliminating internal consistencies within the system of rules acquired through historical derivation. So basically, this is the unified methodological approach in studying social phenomenon according to Safi, yeah, be it from the text or from history, yeah, or from the observation of human actions in the past, yeah. Firstly, analysis of the text, yeah, or phenomenon into its basic components, yeah, the statements and also actions, and then we group similar statements or actions under one category, and then we identify the rules that unify the various categories. So when we look at the various categories, we can identify, yeah, certain rules, certain universal rules which governs, yeah, these categories. Fourthly, identify the general rules and purposes that govern interaction or interrelation of various categories. So between the categories now, then we should identify certain rules, yeah, and also purposes which governs the interaction between the categories which we have identified. And finally, systematize, yeah, the body of rules obtained through the previous procedures, through eliminating any contradictions which might exist, yeah, uh, uh, when we try to formulate or to form certain theories, yeah, on the basis of inference from the text and also history. As for theory building, I mentioned theory a bit just now, yeah. It involves a set of universal principles. So a set of universal principles is incorporated into a theory designed to explain or predict and hence guide the action of specific human interaction, and that the soundness of the theory is examined, yeah, by contrasting hypotheses derived from the theory with observed actions or events. Yeah, so the theory is, I mean, how do we test whether the theory is sound or not? Yeah, it is by examining the contrasting hypothesis and also observing actions and also events. So as long as the theory is able to provide us with clear explanations or accurate predictions, it should be considered sound. However, a repeated mismatch between the observed behavior and the deducted hypothesis indicates the incorrectness or inaccuracy of some of the universal rules, and this points to the inadequacy of the theory and thus calls for modification in the developed theory and or the universal rules and concepts. So if there is consistency, in which the theory is able to provide explanations and also predictions, then the theory is considered sound. However, if there is a mismatch, between that which is predicted and what actually happens, then perhaps the theory is an inaccurate and requires modification. So these are the two main books which I referred to in preparing the slides for the purpose of this live lecture. I understand it is quite theoretical in nature, and we are suddenly immersed with a lot of theories, etc. And this has a lot to do with epistemology as well. Of how do we know something. And that is why this book, The Foundation of Knowledge, is important. And also Taha Jabir Al-Alwani's observations when it comes to the behavioral sciences is also perhaps worth looking at, and for us to reassess our position uh, in relation to the human sciences. So especially for students of human science, perhaps you might relate this, or this might be more relatable to you than students of Islamic legal knowledge. And I have to be honest that I have not studied any branch of human science, formally. So perhaps uh, there is indeed inadequacies in what I have presented. And as I mentioned just now, this indeed would be useful for us to further discuss this issue, inshallah, in our meeting on Wednesday or next Wednesday morning, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Okay. With that, أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله العظيم لي ولكم. Please stay safe, stay sane, take care of yourselves. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.